Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Happy New Year, of course. Apparently, there is cake as a welcome here today, so please grab a slice so I don't eat it all. The date is Thursday, January 10th, 2019. The time is 3:04, and I do call this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified District Governing Board meeting. If we could please start with a roll call from my far right.
Sandy Kravitz.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Allison Beckman.
Patty Beckman.
Barbara Perleberg. All board members are present. We do have a quorum. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll get right to our first action item, 3A, reorganization of the governing board. So just kind of as an explanation, we'll first have discussion, nominations, and discussion around those nominations, those who want to accept or decline nominations. We'll have full discussion there, and after such time, we will then open up for motions, so when we're prepared. So we'll open up discussion. Dr. Creekart, you didn't have any documentation or presentation, correct? We'll just get rolling. All right. So the floor is open for discussion and nominations. Board Member Kravitz?
I nominate Allison Beckham for president.
All right. Ms. Beckham?
No.
You had your hand up, right? A split second after hers.
I apologize.
So at this point, do I make a nomination or do I answer what?
You can do either.
Okay, why don't I do this? I would like to make a recommendation, but I guess since maybe it was put up, I would also like to say thank you for your show of support. And I have thought quite a bit about the presidency because it's a very important position, but at this time I graciously decline. Can I continue?
Of course.
I would like to recommend Patty Beckman as president of the governing board for 2019 year. And I know that this recommendation may seem unusual, as Patty is a new board member, but I believe that Patty is qualified for the position. The president's responsibilities are primarily administrative and entail working closely with the superintendent to fairly represent the governing board's goals. I believe her experience as a business owner and manager provide the necessary business acumen for the job. Her organizational skills, your public speaking ability, your enthusiasm and commitment to SUSD and the board more than qualify you for this position. Patty, I hope you will accept this nomination, and fellow board members, I hope you will support Patty, as I think she is the best person for governing board at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Greenberg?
Yeah, just give me a second to collect my thoughts if anybody else has anything to say in the interim.
Right. Board Member Beckman, would you like to respond to the nomination?
Wow, this was unexpected. I appreciate your support. This is fairly unorthodox, I would probably admit, being a new board member, that it's a position that's probably uniquely tailored to someone that has sat on the board, because there are procedures, etc., and I'm sure a great deal to learn. I was fully prepared today to put my hat in the ring, if you will call it, for vice president. I do feel that our community is looking to this current board for some positive change going forward. And I also believe this community is fairly optimistic about the future of Scottsdale Unified School District. At this time, I appreciate your support, all of you, and I would accept the nomination of president.
Other additional discussion or comments? Board Member Greenberg?
Yeah, I would agree that with the past election that the district is looking for new leadership to move in a new direction, put the past behind us. I think that's something we would all like to see moving forward, rebuilding trust with the community, restoring trust with the community. I do think it is quite unorthodox only because it is a position that usually requires some background knowledge of board management, but I see no reason, or I've had no reason in the past dealings with Ms. Beckman to think that she cannot handle it. I would personally recommend perhaps that Allison take up the vice presidency as someone who does have experience on the board to maybe help out if there's any lack of knowledge or gaps. I think that would probably be a prudent thing to do. I don't know if you'll accept that nomination when we make it, but I would hope that you do at least consider it.
So any additional discussion, comments, or further nominations at this time? Okay, so then I'll open up the floor for a motion regarding the presidency. Board Member Beckham.
I move to recommend Patty Beckman for the 2019 SUSD Governing Board President.
Thank you, Board Member Beckham. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? I'm sorry, I didn't
Oh,
hear.
excuse me,
I didn't hear.
I'll vote aye.
Aye, all right. I wasn't quite sure. All right, motion passes 5-0. Thank you, Board Member Beckman. It's going to be a little hard, I'm going to admit. Beckham and Beckman, that's going to be hard.
I agree.
But thank you for accepting that nomination. And certainly those of us who've been on the board now, some of us for many years, we absolutely look forward to supporting you in your role and giving all the help that we can
And I
and
appreciate it.
experience, and anything I have to pass off to you, I will gladly do that. So thank you very much. Now we will just repeat the process for Vice President. Do we have a nomination for Vice President?
I'll nominate Allison.
I second that.
Any discussion around that nomination? All right. All right, so this time it's easy. We'll open for a motion. I personally would be very happy to make the motion that Board Member Beckham become our Vice President as well. Do I have a second?
I'll
A
second.
Thank you, Board Member Beckman, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion passes 5-0. That is the reorganization of our governing board. And for right now, we're going to go ahead and take a 5-minute little recess, get situated, and Board Member Beckham, when we reconvene, we'll take over. Yeah, we're moving seats, so a little 5-minute recess. Thank you.
At 3:21, and move on to information discussion item 4A, update on communications and marketing department.
Thank you, President Beckman,
It's hard, isn't it?
members of the board. First of all, I would like to welcome Jan Michael and Patty to the board. We will do a more formal welcome, I think, at the regular board meeting on Tuesday, but welcome, and thank you to the board for showing a unified motion and unified face for the district. And I appreciate that, Board Member Beckham, very much for your gesture. The last of the items that we had promised this fall of reports on the various departments is the marketing and communications plan. As you know, our former public information officer left as of June 30th. We searched far and wide across the countryside, and we're very fortunate to be able to hire Amy Bolton, who comes came to us with experience as a public information officer in two non-district organizations, a city and a police department in the valley, but also great marketing talent and marketing experience in the private sector, and as a communications director in out of the governor's office for the emergency, I don't know exactly what that was called.
Homeland Security.
For Homeland Security, the local branch of Homeland Security. She brings great experience, and what she knew and what we of course read about in all books of leadership, when you take over a position, you should spend a good deal of time asking questions and assessing the situation before you move forward. She has done that, and I think that will be seen in her presentation. I did not hurry her because of the extensive research that she was doing. So we are in January rather than December in making this report, but this is an especially appropriate time where better late than never applies. So with that, I would like to very proudly introduce Amy Bolton.
Thank you. Thank you, President Beckman, members of the board, Dr. Creekard. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be able to deliver this information to you today. So I will start, excuse me, let's back it up. There we go. So here's an overview of what we're going to be talking about. In the interest of today's agenda, the information you have in your book may vary slightly from this presentation, but we wanted to keep things moving. So I'll be talking about our team, what drives us, where we're going and why we're doing that. We'll look at some web and social stats, and then I'll tell you what we have planned for the year ahead. So this is a look at the Office of Communications and Marketing here at SUSD. I have a fantastic team. I am so thankful for their service, and we're very well equipped. So I'd just like to put that out there. On the next slide, I'll break down our daily tasks. And of note, we've just added a part-time social media person, a social media specialist. So that's working really well. That's going to allow us to do so much more and expand our support of schools. So looking at that, this just breaks down the tasks that we have per each person. And so I like to think of breaking out marketing. I think this helps us have a shared vocabulary and a deeper understanding of what each team member does. So that red and orange, that kind of breaks down my tasks, if you will. The yellow breaks down our crisis or emergency communications, all the things that we're doing on a regular basis, not just when something happens, but we're constantly planning and preparing for that. And when it happens, we're ready to spring into action. And then after something happens, there's a lot of tasks that we do there. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody felt very reassured that we're constantly thinking about that. Employee engagement. That's where Renee comes in. She's our office manager here at the district office, and she's sending our employee newsletter. She's managing the switchboard, being our office manager, and hopefully shortly she'll be working off of an intranet. Community engagement is Nancy Norman, and she does a fantastic job of handling the celebrations with the board. So you see her handling that. Mm-hmm. She works on community newsletters, community relations, and she has fantastic relationships with folks in the community. She engages with SPC, PTOs, and then also our schools, and then she does assist with executive communications. Visual engagement is Victor Bobbitt. We are so thankful that we have Victor in the district because he handles a huge workload with graphic design, produces collateral, marketing materials, advertising, branding. Digital communications is Joe Manna. He does so much more than the web. So he does handle all the legal postings. He does online engagement, web analytics, and then also our website experience. And then we have Ashley with content posting and social analytics, social experience and social engagement. So that's a quick breakdown of what our department does. Moving on, we are driven by three things, three business drivers. And these business drivers were extracted from all of the information that I was able to glean from you, the board. What is it that you would like to see? So we're driven by attracting and retaining amazing talent in the district to make sure we're delivering excellent services. We're driven by attracting and retaining students and their family. We're also driven by constantly doing everything we can to bolster and improve the reputation and branding of this district. And then obviously we always have emergency communications ready to go. CTA that you're seeing on the screen is just call to action. So what is it that we want folks to do as a result of our efforts there? We want folks to apply for positions here or refer a friend. We want student families to apply or enroll, refer friends, and then in terms of our community, we'd like support in that area. So this chart that you're seeing here, I've included it today just to make sure that that you know, as well as the public knows, that we're constantly dealing with 5 generations of people, and they each have different relationships with technology, parenting, and economics. So when we plan our communication and marketing strategies, we take this information into account. We have 8 key audiences, and I'll just run down those really quickly, but new and existing employees as part of our audience, new and existing students and their families. The media is an audience for us, as you know, stakeholders and community members, taxpayers, and the general public. So this quickly is just a digital marketing journey. This just tells the story as people become familiar with SUSD and their journey with us from the moment they very first discover who SUSD is, all the way down until you have that 30 or 40-year employee. This is what we see as the types of communication information that we would share with them. So as they get more and more familiar, we're providing content that gets more and more specific to what their needs are. And that you'll see in the later part of the presentation is determined by analytics and what they're telling us, how we track that through our digital marketing. So if you were to ask me, what is the marketing strategy of SUSD, I would say it's summarized in this one slide. So what you see on the left is what were we doing in 2017? And this is a journey that all organizations, I would say, are on at some point or another. This just isn't SUSD. So as we have more and more technology in the workplace, and as our audiences, in this case parents, employees, are more familiar with technology, they're moving from a more analog experience to a more digital experience. And so this chart really summarizes the activities that we're undertaking, where we've been, and where we're going. We are definitely moving to a content marketing strategy, and there's a lot of information out there to read about, and it gets me really excited because this is what I love doing. At the end of the day, it's really about creating information that tells the story of who we are as a district. What are we delivering in the classroom? What are all those services that you might not see on a daily basis that do support the classroom, that do support parents, that do support our teachers? So I'm really excited to really mine those stories and put that information out there for everybody to digest in a variety of formats. One of the key things I'd like to point out here on this slide is that in the past, when you're not doing a digital strategy, you're relying more on hunch metrics. And what that digital evolution is going to allow us to do is really pull actual statistics from our website, from social media, to know what do people want to know, how are they using our content, and what should we talk more about. So that's what is really exciting about this journey that we're on. And we're at the very start of this journey. I'll talk a little bit more about the technology that's needed to accomplish this. So there are a lot of definitions out there about what is marketing and what is traditional marketing and what is digital marketing. So this slide, I've just included it to make sure that we're using the same vocabulary. In my mind, I almost see an overlay of those generations. You can kind of think of them in 3 columns. Some of our more mature generations are relying on that collateral. They might not be as online as some of our younger generations. So again, we're constantly keeping this in mind. So we're applying a mix of these tactics. So depending on the message, we're hitting the right audience. If you pass by our office, you'll see a huge spreadsheet. I didn't include that in this presentation because it'd be really hard to see, but for 2019, we have a campaign planned with 384 different messages that we'd like to share. This campaign was created by our whole department off of our business drivers. It dives into pretty much every department in the district, every school. It's going to highlight all of our programs. It's going to highlight curriculum for every grade. So we've really taken an approach to make sure we're applying our services equally across all that SUSD has to offer. So over the next 12 months, I can say this is a really ambitious plan. I hope that we hit all of those 384 campaigns, but things move quickly, and if we have something crop up, as is the nature of our district, we might not hit that 384 mark, but that's our goal. So for 48 weeks of the year, we're going to be pushing content out 7 days a week, and it's all driving back to those 3 business drivers: attracting and retaining talent, trying to retain and attract students, and trying to keep our reputation as great as it can be with all of our audiences. This chart here, there's a lot going on here, but basically what this chart is all about is how are we going to achieve this plan? And this is really about making sure that we're applying the resources in my department as efficiently as possible. So in the past, I say we kind of had a little bit of a deli counter mentality. People could walk in, they could place an order, and we would fulfill that order. That's great. That gives great immediate service, but it makes our service a little bit I guess unequal. If you're not walking in, you might not get that service. And then also under that model, we don't get the benefit of a full comprehensive consultation to see what else can we do. So this chart really just tells the story of, we've created some criteria for when something happens in the district and it needs publicity or promotion. This is how we're going to apply resources to it to make sure that we're not, as a group, sitting down and using all of our resources if it's just something that's going to be, has a small audience or a short shelf life. Those things that have a wide audience that are going to stay around for a long time, we're going to apply a lot more resources to those types of things. So it's all about efficiency with us and this slide. So this is where we dig in. These are some web metrics, and I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I just want to stress the importance of our website. So now that we're moving to this digital strategy, the website is our most important digital communication asset. It works every day of the year, 24/7, 365. So we do want to make sure that our website is as optimized as possible and as user-friendly as possible. We did a web survey. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but the community gave us some great feedback and insight, and a little bit was surprising, but most of it confirmed the thoughts that we had, that we do need to make some changes, and so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But these metrics give us insight into who our audience is, what's on their mind, how they're using our website, and how we can best optimize it for them. I think of these almost like, as a doctor might think of blood test results. I can look at these and I can diagnose some things that we need to look at immediately. And overall, I would say my comment on this is we need to make the website more mobile friendly, because that's how more and more people are accessing it. And we need to make it tacky. We need to have sticky, I guess is a good word, to make sure that our content keeps people on our site longer. It is answering all of their questions. And all of this drives back to efficiency in the front office of our schools. So the more things we can answer online, probably the less calls we can divert for repetitive information requests in the front office, and let those folks focus on the business of running their school. The website should be able to tackle that for them. So this slide really looks at our social media as an overview. So I just wanted to point out that every school in the district has an official Facebook and Twitter account, and I would encourage all of you and everyone out there, if you're not subscribed, please do that. We would love to have you looking at our content daily. And the schools run and manage those. We have special software at the district office where we can take those over if we need to and monitor those. The district office also has access to 3 different social media channels that schools do not, and we use those in a special way. That includes Nextdoor, which is geographically based social media software, so we can target neighborhoods in a specific area around a specific school through Nextdoor. We have LinkedIn, which is more about recruitment and professional development, and we can tell certain stories there. And then we have YouTube as well. Some schools are dabbling in Instagram, and we're so happy that they are, and we welcome that. And we do have a lot of opportunity for growth on social media, so that's an area I'm excited about in 2019. This chart here really talks about the relationship between technology, communication, and marketing. And I use this chart to make sure to assess how are we doing with that technology infrastructure. The good news is we have a lot of good things in place, but we also have a lot of room for improvement. And so I'll talk about how we're going to improve the website here momentarily. But I'm so thankful that our cabinet and as a board, your leadership, we have the ability to upgrade those pieces of technology. I see this as a key initiative for us, and in 2019, my team will be working really hard on upgrading that infrastructure to get us up to an industry standard where we need to be. The biggest piece of technology, again, is that website for communication and marketing. So we are undertaking the project of changing website platforms, again, to get us to where we need to be. This chart talks about how do we make that decision. And again, there's a lot going on here, but I can look at this chart in 3 ways. There's the user interface, the experience that people have when they come to the website. There's the design of that. Is it accessible to all who need it? And is it usable? Can they find what they're looking for? Then there's the content piece. What is on that website? That's our content strategy. That goes back to that 384 campaign. And the way the content is organized, that's information architecture. Is it intuitive? If I'm a parent, can I find what I'm looking for? If I'm not yet in the district, can I find what I'm looking for? And then there's the platform itself, is the software. Is it functional? Does it have all the functionality that we need? Can people put content up there and then have someone approve it before it's published? And then content management, how fresh is that content? Is it meeting the needs of our audience? So we did a web survey. It was open for 46 days. We surveyed the community and our employees. 715 people took the survey, and we received back over 1,000 comments. I'm excited to say that I read every single one of those comments over the break, and I categorized them, and those are the percentages that you see on this chart. So of the concerns and praise that people had, 34% are looking for their website experience to be usable, and we know that, and that's the impetus behind changing our platform. 28% are wanting to make sure that our content's updated, that they can find what they're looking for, is that last 25%. So what that experience is, what's on there, and then can they find it. So no surprises there, but now we have the data to back it up, and we have some really great comments and suggestions. And as a side note, you'll see the existing website change a little bit over the course of the next few weeks. We're going to optimize what we have before we put it in a new platform, because we don't want to put content that isn't working in our new platform. So we'll be working with the departments and the schools just to make sure that we're optimizing what we have. And the goal, again, of this changing of a website platform is just to make sure that we have a usable piece of software, that it's the industry standard, and that it meets the needs of our key audiences. We're also going to be looking at changing our mass notification system. Again, that would take place, that would be the software that we would use in an emergency. So again, making sure that we're well equipped to act fast and to act in a way where we can put the content out there where it needs to be with as few steps as possible, with as most accuracy as possible. And then I'm excited to say that we're looking at adding a mobile application so parents can go, or anyone can go in one place and see everything that's happening in the district. And this would be subscription based. So if you're a parent that has a student in 2 different schools or 3 different schools, you can just subscribe to whatever content you're looking for and you would get it all in one place. And that would be optimized for mobile. So that's an exciting development we're looking to have in 2019. I have on the side solving for future. That's really what I'm looking at is the things that we're doing today. We want to make sure we're meeting the needs and growth of the district 5 years from now. So it's really hard to read, but this is just a listing of a few of the initiatives going on in my department. I couldn't do this again without my amazing team. They just take it and run with it. So again, want to thank them. We have so many initiatives going on other than the things that I've been able to cover here in the time today, but that's just a quick listing of them. And then the next slide is a look at what we have coming up in 2019. So it's busy up there, but again, a lot of things ahead in the future for us. And with that, I'm happy to answer any and all of your questions.
So if you had to point to one thing that you think is different from the way we previously marketed to what you're doing now, what would it be? The second part of this question is your measurement of success, those 3 drivers you talk about, is it going to be the teacher retention and attraction and student attraction?
Great questions, and thank you, President Beckman. So the one thing that we're doing different, I would say, is that transition from analog, ad-centric, vendor-centric marketing to digital content marketing, where it's very audience-centric. So rather than relying on what we think, we're collecting metrics, and we're using those metrics from our website, from social media, to provide content and information where it's informed and we're answering questions and providing more of what is the audience wants. Not what we want to say, but what they need. And then the measurement of that, I like the idea of tying it to teacher retention, staff retention, and student retention, but I think there's a lot more factors at play with those items. That's our goal at the end of the day, is to make sure that we're growing and sustaining the district. More direct measures for those things will be, we call them KPIs, key performance indicators, for website traffic, for social media engagement. Are we growing our followers? Are they engaging with us? So as a communication and marketing department, I'll be looking at those KPIs off of our website and our social media accounts more closely. And when we see growth there, I've set an initial growth goal of 10% for those metrics for us over the next calendar year. As we implement, we know we're going to probably hit some speed bumps along the way of implementation of new technology, but overall I hope to see 10% growth in those areas for those digital KPIs.
Any further questions? Board Member Beckman?
You had mentioned, thank you first of all, Amy. You had mentioned that the website is going to be revamped. You said in the next 2 weeks we'll see some changes, and I believe in the last information session you had, I think you might have mentioned that the actual website platform would be changing maybe over the summer. Is that still the target date?
We are working right now with a vendor to get them on contract. So we're in the early stages of this process. Once we kind of move through that stage, then what we'll do is work with them on a more accurate timeline. But that was the feedback that I got, is that we try and roll this out not when school is in session, but when our folks have time to get used to it and parents have time to get used to it before there's an urgent need at the start of school. So that's the ideal timing. I would like to stick to that timeline, but we do, once we get that vendor on contract, and then once we start digging into all the particulars with our different databases and business systems interfacing with that website, I think we'll get a more detailed timeline for you, but that's the goal.
But the goal is sometime in the summer, and then preferably June or July, since parents will be going on mid-July, I imagine.
My goal is to have a soft rollout for staff internally in May, so it's not public, so we can start breaking it and making all the experience that internally, and then maybe a soft, we can run them in parallel so people can access it, but then they can also default to the website if they'd like that, and then there'll be a hard date where we turn it on, and I would like that to be in July. But again, once we get that vendor on contract, they'll tell us, once they assess our website and the capabilities that we have, what a more realistic timeline, or more accurate, I should say.
And then, second, you mentioned parents. One of the experience will be, and not just parents, but all the rest of the stakeholders, is to have a improved mobile site or device.
Yes.
So if you are a parent, you would, right now, you still would sign up for Facebook and Twitter at your school's sites. And then to find out district communication and information, where should they go?
Great question, and thank you for the opportunity to articulate that. Anybody, any member of the community, including parents, can always sign up to the district Facebook and Twitter accounts. We use Facebook and Twitter as the basic news source. So anything that rises to the level to garner publicity for the district, we issue on Facebook and Twitter. And all of this information is online at susd.org. All of our accounts are on there. We do have a page for that. Parents and media can always log on to the website. That's open 24/7, and we're going to be putting all the news releases that we have on there. Those are some of the pages that we're revamping right now. So people will see changes in that area. They can subscribe to our Community Connection newsletter, and that information is online at susd.org. That is a monthly email newsletter that Nancy creates and sends, and that summarizes the highlights of everything that's been going on in the district, and it contains a letter by Dr. Krikar, and he shares his message to the community every month in that way as well. So those, I would say, are the main sources. When we get the new website up and running, I hope to further expand that to maybe include some blogs and then the mobile app. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and get that project underway first.
So I just want to clarify, if you're a parent and you don't use Facebook or Twitter, you still can get the same content by just logging on to the website?
You should be able to get most of the content. Some of the content is only for social media. Those are things that happen in the moment, like we took a picture of the cake this afternoon, and we'll put that on social media, but we wouldn't put that on the website. So I would say the Community Connection, if people have email, that will go right in their email box, and that's probably one of the best non-social media sources for the district.
So I have to ask, because one of the areas that is so important for the parents in the community is the safety of the school. So if there is an incident at a school, the first line is not going to be Facebook and Twitter, or I'm sure it will go out Facebook and Twitter. But if you're a parent and you want to find out what's happening, where do you go?
So when there is an emergency in the district, it is most critical before there's an emergency for parents and guardians to make sure that their information is updated in synergy with the front office at the school. We use whatever information is on file in synergy in our mass notification system. It's an automatic database update, so if that information is out of date or missing, they will unfortunately miss those mass notifications. So I would encourage everybody with a child in the district to confirm that at the start of every school year.
And I'll clarify myself. So my phone just went dead, so or I'm out of service somewhere. I hear there's an emergency. Where do I go as a parent without calling the school, because those phones, you don't want to clog them up? Where would you go to find out? Do you go to the website somewhere and there
We will
is
have-
an area?
Yes, ma'am. We will have the information on social media, on a mass notification system.
That's not working, so that's why I need to
Certainly.
know.
It will be on the website. In the notification process, depending on the type of emergency, we can notify news media, and then information would be there as well. It would depend on the type and the nature of the emergency and how quickly it unfolds. Certainly anything of a larger scale, media would be aware of that. They're continuously monitoring public safety channels, and then our partners in that area as well. If it rose to that level, they would have their channels as well.
All right, great.
In the future, we would have a mobile app as well, but in your scenario, it wouldn't be accessible.
Board Member Kravitz?
Thank you, President Beckman. Robocalls would still be used in that instance, yes or no?
Absolutely,
Right. So, I mean, if
absolutely.
your phone's dead, you
Right, you
basically
can't
don't
use it.
exist
Right,
anymore in this
someone
world,
official
unless you have a landline phone, so you get that. But I just wanted to, if may continue, I just wanted to make the point that my lack of questioning or any of our other colleagues' lack of questioning isn't reflected in disinterest, but we met with you in December for over an hour and saw your presentation and had a very lengthy, fruitful conversation. So I just want to put that out there as well. I think during that time and in this presentation, you mentioned using our current resources to its fullest potential, which I think will be something new and I appreciate as well. I especially like the slide which showed the efficient response and distribution of resources, which people, parents or whatever, our community may not notice the difference, but I think that is a very important, I don't want to say improvement because it doesn't, but a nice change of pace for how the department is evolving. Because again, I don't want to sound like I'm being negative with how the department was run before, but I think it's a really good way for that department, which does have very limited resources, to evolve. So thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Greenberg?
Just one quick question. I apologize I didn't send this to you prior. What is the level of teacher or other employee involvement with these processes? I mean, are they writing blogs about what they're doing in the classroom? Are they sending the photos to you? I mean, just what is that level? Only because, we do have a great staff and they are up individually up to many great things, and I'm sure the community and people, whether on LinkedIn or Facebook, enjoy seeing what's going on in the classrooms.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity. That's a fantastic question. At any time, any teacher or member of the school staff can send information to their school digital communicator. There's one at every school where they can put that information at the school on the website and social media. We also welcome those stories to come into our office, and we can publicize them as well. Over the break, we launched something called Teacher Tuesday. So we're asking teachers to fill out a survey and step forward and tell us, why did they get into teaching and what is it about teaching that excites them. And so that's a new initiative we're undertaking in 2019, and we'll distribute those pieces of content through LinkedIn and promote it on social media and then through employee newsletters. So there's so many stories to be told, and then at any time through the initiatives that we're working on with content, as a regular matter of course, we are in constant communication with principals or folks at the schools to share information back and forth, and that happens every day out of my office. So those are some of the ways, but going forward, we'll have a lot more opportunities to share.
Any further questions?
I would ask a question. How, in the future with the new software that we have, how easy or difficult will it be for individual schools to update their websites?
Fantastic question, Dr. Precard, and thank you. That was pretty much the first criteria that we identified as a team for updating the website. So making sure that when there is information to share, if it's cumbersome to get online, chances are it's probably not going to get online. So that, again, when we were looking at website vendors, was one of the main criteria that we used. Is it easy? If I'm not trained in doing websites, can I put content up there? And again, the software that we're looking at would make it very easy. Just like a Word document, copy, paste, post. That's what we're looking for.
Good answer.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, we will
Thank
move
you.
on to,
Thank you.
thank you, Mrs. Bolton, that was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
We will move on to information discussion item 4B, annual open meeting law training.
So introduce Ms. Michelle Marshall, our general counsel. This is an annual event or a biennial?
It is an
Annual event.
celebration of the
Annual
open meeting.
celebration of the open meeting law. One trivia question. What is the group at the state called that monitors open meeting law violations?
Attorney
Are
General.
you talking about omelet?
I am talking about omelet
The open meeting law,
enforcement.
some team?
Team.
Team, omelet. You didn't even tell me you were going to do that.
I have confidence in you.
Good afternoon, Madam President. Congratulations, and members of the board, Dr. Creekard, Sandra, Cabinet, and everyone. As Dr. Creekard mentioned, we do this annually, our open meeting law training. I'll get into a few of the reasons why it's good to do this. And then this year I have a couple of extra things that I was asked to share with you, and those are at the end. One is our conflict of interest, the board member version of that form. I'm going to go through that with you toward the end, and you each have a copy of that policy as well as the form in front of you, which you can either sign and return to me today, or if you have questions or just want to think about it, you can get back to me later. And then the last item that I was asked to share with you is our technology use guidelines. I'll just show a few highlights of what those guidelines say. You'll have them in front of you, and we'll also ask you to sign and return those when you are able to do that. So to get started, why do we do this? So the original reason that we started doing this every single year is an old consent decree from 1998 where the then Scottsdale board was alleged to have violated open meeting law, particularly with respect to executive session. So that old consent decree doesn't have a specific end date, but even if it did, we still think it's a good practice to every year remind everybody what the rules are, and take questions and share with the public what the rules are. So that's kind of why we do it. So the open meeting law, as most of you probably know, just says that all meetings will be open to the public. Any legal action that will be taken by the board must be taken in public. You can't have a private meeting and make decisions about the business of the district. That all has to be out in the open so that people can see what we're doing. So what is legal action? It's all discussions, deliberations, considerations, consultations of a majority of you, which is 3, a quorum of you, that may foreseeably require final action. Just like with our conflict of interest rules, in which we have to refrain from participating in actions in which we have a conflict, we have a broad definition of what it means to take legal action or deliberate about legal action. So you can't engage in discussions of a quorum of board members that might lead to a final action. You don't want to make considerations. You don't want to consult. We'll talk a little bit more in the presentation later about email, being careful not to have a serial conversation amongst you. One of the other areas that you want to be careful about is sometimes we'll have a really long meeting and need to take a break. You don't want to talk during the break amongst yourselves about continuing conversations that were on the record, off the record. So those are just some examples of places where you want to be careful. It's human nature to try to continue a conversation or have a conversation, and it's sometimes kind of difficult to get used to that. Staying in the rules and having that, sometimes it seems a little silted. Oh, sorry, I've already talked to somebody else about that on the board. I'm going to have to ask you not to talk to me about that. This is the public policy. behind the law, the public policy is to have government in the sunshine. So when in doubt, wherever there's a close question, make sure that you're doing it in an open meeting. Who is covered? This is a list of who's covered, but what really applies to us is this board is covered. Advisory committees of this board are also covered and must comply with the open meeting law. The most common example of an advisory committee of this board is our site councils. So they have to post their agendas and let the public understand what they're doing in their business. That is an area that I'm currently working with our staff on, seeing what is it that all of our schools are doing and making sure that they are getting those reminders that they need to comply with those laws as well. When are you not required to have comply with the open meeting law? Do you want to interrupt?
When you finish that first or second bullet, I would like to add.
Oh, sure. So one of the most common areas where we're not really required to comply with open meeting law in terms of posting notices are social events and seminars or conferences. Often the board will be invited just, hey, we're having a ribbon cutting or we're having a dinner. Those are okay to do. It's okay for a quorum or more of you to be there. And it's okay for you and great for you to socialize and talk with your colleagues, just not about things that might come before the board for a vote. As the ombudsperson for the state recommends, we comply with a recommendation that those items, when we know about them in advance, we post a courtesy notice. Sandra is very much in the practice of, 3 of them are going to be somewhere. We'll post a notice as soon as we find out about that. Dr. Krikart, did you have an addition to that?
So on that note, I want to remind board members, if you receive an invitation to an event where you, as a board member, please let Sandra know. In most cases, we like organizations to send the invitations to Sandra, and then she sends it out to you so that she can monitor that and know if there's a possibility of a majority being there. But if you would, when you are going to attend a public event, if you would just let her know, and she'll keep track of how many people and what's going on, and that would be helpful to avoid any complications here.
Thank you. And this is just straight from the ombudsperson's office, saying the same thing about social events. So one key exception, and we'll talk about more, but the main exception for not having to have a public meeting is, of course, for the privacy of our students. So when we have a disciplinary matter, suspension, expulsion of a student, we're not required, obviously, to have that meeting in public. We can have that in executive session. So what does the board have to do to comply with the open meeting law in general? 1, provide notice of the meeting, at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. 2, have an agenda. We're not required to post the agenda, but it has to be available 24 hours in advance. In this district, we post the agenda. We have to meet in public, allow the public to attend, take any legal action in public, and then have meeting minutes available within 3 days after the meeting. As I mentioned, notices have to be posted at least 24 hours in advance. Saturdays can count as part of that 24 hours as long as we have it posted on our website, which we have a practice of doing. Notice has to be specific enough that a member of the public can understand what it is you're going to be talking about. And that specificity is kind of a question of fact, depending on what it is you're going to be talking about. One example I have here is from the Attorney General's agency handbook that talks about open meeting law. And this is an example that would be okay to post if you're going to talk about, quote, budget priorities and revisions for the upcoming fiscal year. You might not know exactly what every line item is you're going to be talking about, but that gives the public an idea, okay, the board's going to be talking about the budget. I might be interested in tuning in. Generally, it's a violation for board members to discuss anything that's not posted on the agenda. I'll talk about exceptions to that in a moment. We also need to make sure that our meetings are accessible to those with disabilities. This is the standard language that we have on every notice notifying those with disabilities who need an accommodation to please contact us in advance so that we can arrange for that. Executive session. That's just a term that defines when we can meet behind closed doors, and we're allowed to do that, you're allowed to do that, for, I think it's 7 reasons that are enumerated in statute. Only those who are reasonably necessary for the board to carry out its responsibilities can attend an executive session. And the notice has to state exactly what provision that you're meeting under. You can't just say, we're going to have an executive session and not say, you know, it's for an employee matter or it's for legal advice. You have to say which version, which part of the statute you're meeting under. These are some of the reasons for which you can meet for an executive session. Personnel matters are a common one. That's A1, where you can meet and talk about a particular employee's performance or contract, et cetera. The employee is entitled to notification that you're going to do that. They're not entitled to be in the meeting, but you can call them into the meeting. They are entitled to request that most of that meeting be held in public if they give us advance notice. Everything except, I think, salary can be in public if the employee so chooses. Most don't, but there's a provision that allows you to consider records that have been made confidential in executive session. We don't use that one very often. Legal advice is a pretty common one. If you have, for instance, a contract that you're considering, you can have an executive session for legal advice. Another thing that we do with legal advice, which is permitted, is we have on every meeting notice posted that you may vote to convene in executive session for legal advice on any matter that's posted on the agenda. So even if you didn't say item 9A was going to be an executive session, but somebody decides, hey, wait a minute, I'm not sure about the legalities of this, you can move to go into executive session for that purpose. You can also, related to legal advice, is giving direction to your attorneys on pending or contemplated litigation or settlement discussions. We have the ability to meet with the board in executive session to report on meet and confer, so that you can talk about your position in negotiations with employees. And then finally, one that we sometimes use is for negotiations to sell or purchase real estate or lease it. Calls to the public. The public has the right to attend and listen. The public actually does not have the right to speak at board meetings, but we do have an opportunity at our regular board meetings for the public to speak. We can and we do impose a time limit of, in our case, 3 minutes per speaker. In general, you as board members cannot have a discussion or take action if somebody comes up to the podium and speaks about something that's not noticed for your discussion, but you can direct administration to follow up or ask that it be put on a future agenda item. You can also respond to criticism and, like I said, ask staff to review a matter. I mentioned that we would talk a little bit more in detail about emails and texts. These are places where we tend to be a little bit more casual with our conversation. And this is just a reminder of some best practices. One, when you receive an email to all of you, there's an email group called GovBoard that some people will write to you. Try to remember not to reply all. It's just a good practice not to reply all. If you want to share information with fellow board members, that needs to be done in a meeting. In addition, there's this serial conversation problem that can happen and is much more easy to violate the open meeting law when you're on email or texting. And that is 2 of you having a conversation about something that is the business of the district, which is permitted. But once one of the 2 of you reaches out to a third and says, hey, I was talking to so-and-so about X item, and this is how each of us feels about it. What do you think? Then we're into the violation of the open meeting law. What are the penalties if it's violated? Any legal action that was taken in violation of the meeting is null and void unless the board properly notices it and ratifies that action. A civil penalty not to exceed $500 per violation can be found against the individual found to have violated the law. The Attorney General can prosecute and can also impose other equitable remedies, which is what happened in the 1998 case. It was an agreement, not a judgment. The court can also order the individuals to pay attorney's fees and costs, and these can't be paid by the district. They're people are personally liable for violations. And then if a court were to determine that an officer who violates the open meeting law intended to deprive the public of an opportunity to hear, the court can remove someone from office for that violation. So that's the end of my slides on open meeting law. Are there any questions or comments about that before I move on?
Board Member Kravitz?
Thank you. I think you had a slide in there that said you don't need to post the agenda, just a notice. Is that's correct? And there was something about specificity. There
Yes.
didn't need to be too specific. Do you need to post the supporting documents?
Thank you for that question, and I have received that question quite a bit. We are not required to post the supporting documents. We have a practice of trying to post, some of the pertinent documents. But for instance, if we took a regular board agenda and tried to post every single document, the public would get lost trying to figure out what's there. So no, we're not required to post every document, and I've had that question from the public before. We're required to have available for someone to come review at least 24 hours before a meeting any of those documents. So if the board's going to consider a contract, for example, that we want, have it on consent, it's, nothing controversial, you've seen it before. If somebody says, hey, I want to see that we need to be able to hand that to them or let them come see it.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a question.
Yes.
So I know you give this presentation annually, and I watched it last year too, so thank you. If there should be a complaint, if one of our constituents actually brings forth a complaint, do you discuss it with us, say that it's not even warranted, but someone's perception was whatever it was? Do you come and discuss it with the board and say, this is where we can do better, although it wasn't warranted, nothing was found to be wrong, this was the perception? How is that handled?
It will depend on the nature of the complaint. I have certainly received complaints directly to my office where I've just worked with the person to explain why it wasn't a violation or, just talk to the person as to why it was not a violation. When that's the case, I haven't followed up with the board because there was not a violation. We have had complaints rise to the level of, going to the Attorney General's office, and I certainly notify the board when we have that and explain what the district side of the story is, and if there's room for improvement, definitely I would make those recommendations to the board. Sometimes I'll do that in a legal advice memo to the board, which is privileged unless you waive the privilege, and you would have to waive it as a board. So those are kind of examples of how I've handled it when it's come to my office. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Okay. As I mentioned, we're also going to look a little bit today at the policy that deals with board member conflict of interest. I'm sure you're all aware that we had a lot of talk about conflict of interest in the last year, and we made improvements to our policy for staff conflict of interest. At the same time, we made improvements to the board member conflict of interest. And so this will be our first opportunity to have the board this year fill out the new and improved conflict of interest forms. So I wanted to go through what the entire policy says and show you and the public what the form looks like with this. So policy BCB does include some information that's not just about the conflict of interest. One is this voting restrictions provision, which I have in your slide. It says that you can vote on you're eligible to vote on any matter that comes before you, except if it concerns the appointment, employment, or remuneration of any member, him or herself, or any person related to you as a dependent. And dependent is defined in state statute, and the state statute in turn defines dependent as the IRS defines dependent. There is also in policy BCB an employment limitation, which states that no dependent with the same definition of dependent of a board member can be employed by the district unless the board votes to approve that employment. And then finally, no employee of the district or spouse of the employee can be a board member. So the conflict of interest provisions of policy BCB are just like the ones for staff conflict of interest. Any board member who has him or herself, or whose relative has, and relative is defined, who has a substantial interest, which is also defined, in any contract, sale, purchase, or service to the district, has to make known that interest, which you will do as board members by filling out the form, in our official records, and shall refrain from voting on or otherwise participating in any manner in that contract, sale, or purchase. The next provision talks about, it has the same prohibition, except it is as to any decisions of the board, that you shall refrain from participating in any manner in a decision of the board if you or a relative has a substantial interest in the outcome of that decision. And then we have the refrain from participating. And like I said, just like with open meeting law and taking legal action, refrain from participating means refrain from participating in any way in the process leading up to the decision. So it's not just making that decision, it is talking about it, considering it, emailing others about it. All of those things that lead up to a final decision are prohibited. If you have a conflict, you're prohibited from participating in that. That was a mouthful. What I have for you with the form is I've given you a copy of the entire policy, and also the form has the statutory definitions that include what is a substantial interest, what does refrain from mean, et cetera. And so, again, if you have any questions about any particular item that you think you may or may have a conflict or just want to talk about it, I'm happy to talk with you offline about that. Finally, policy BCB also has a provision that in my memory, and I've been here 11 years now, we've never had, which is making purchases from a board member. We've never done this, but if for some reason we found ourselves in that situation, we do have provisions for what's allowed and what's prohibited, and that's what this part of policy BCB states. So if we're going to purchase supplies, materials, or equipments, we would be limited to $300 per transaction. Total purchases can't exceed $1,000 in a 12-month period. We have to comply with the USFR, and the board has to, by majority vote, adopt a policy authorizing those purchases. Like I said, that's one that we've never used in my time here. So back to that conflict of interest disclosure. The policy also says that we shall maintain for public inspection in a special file anything showing that that a board member has a substantial interest. So with both staff member and board member conflict of interest, I am keeping a record of those in the legal department, and then with board member, there's also a duplicate file for in Sandra's office as a backup. I put into the slides so that we could show our viewers and for your viewing what the form looks like. This is the first page of it. You're providing it to legal department for our conflict disclosure file. Once I have yours filled out, I will scan those so that we have them electronically. Fill out your name. The instructions are that you are to enter your initial one within 5 calendar days of either commencing work, which we could call today commencing work, or taking office. And then at least annually thereafter. Employees also have to do these at least annually, whether you have a conflict or not. The other thing is that if, once you've done your annual conflict, a conflict arises within that year, you have 15 calendar days to notify us. You can contact my office or Human Resources. I would say the board should just contact my office and let me know, and we'll get you a new form to fill out to state what that new conflict is. So this is the statement of conflict. If you believe you have a conflict, you fill out your name, that you're a board member, and that either you or your relative, and you identify the relative, has a substantial interest in contract, sale, purchase, decision, investigation, or other matter. And then we ask you to identify what the matter is, identify the relative, and describe what the substantial interest is. Date and sign, and then another date and signature where you are agreeing to refrain from participating in that matter in which you have a conflict. If you do not have a conflict and you don't have a relative who has a conflict, then you're going to fill out this part of the form, which just says that you don't have one and you don't have a relative who has one, and you date and sign that. And finally, everyone will sign this last part, which is just acknowledging that you've been provided a copy of the policy, that you've read it, and that you agree to comply with it. Any questions on that? Okay. See me if you have any particular questions about an item. And finally, Ms. Debbie Spalding, our IT director, asked me to review our technology use and privacy guidelines with you. So you have that form to fill out, and just so that everybody knows what it is you have in front of you, I've highlighted some of those guidelines here in this presentation. This just defines what technology resources are. In this case, I believe you were provided with laptops and accessories by the IT department. The technology use and privacy guidelines define improper use, which includes harassment, discrimination, defamation, inappropriate communications with students or minors, copyright infringement, other unlawful activity, using our technology to engage in a conflict of interest, sharing confidential or proprietary information, and then use of district resources to influence the outcome of elections. And then that catch-all, other improper uses. The technology use and privacy guidelines, this is exactly the same thing as what our employees fill out, by the way. It just reminds people that you don't have a reasonable expectation of privacy in district resources. The most typical of those is email. Those are subject to inspection or search. We commonly search email, for instance, in response to records requests. So it's just a reminder to people so that they don't have a claim later that we made them feel like it was okay in private and that we weren't going to maybe possibly look at it later. It includes a reminder that we expect people to keep their passwords confidential, but even so, passwords don't negate the fact that there's no reasonable expectation of privacy in what you put on district resources. There's also a caution that nothing is ever really deleted, just a reminder. So those are the highlights of what's in that guideline. If you have any questions, I'm sure Debbie would be happy to step up and answer those. And that's the end of my show.
Okay. I think that was short and eventful today. So do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay.
A second?
Second, do you want a second? Second. Great, okay.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye. Motion passes
Motion
5-0.
passes 5-0. We are adjourned.
We
Thank you.
adjourned.
Allison, and good
At
job.
4:25. Thank you.
Great job.